This news is funded by viewers like you. Please support our work at democracynow.org/give. News reports from northern Israel show Israeli military tanks massing along the Israel-Lebanon border after Israel launched its first attack in central Beirut. Earlier today, Israel struck a building near the busy Kola Bridge intersection of the Lebanese capital after carrying out a massive attack Friday on a Beirut suburb that assassinated Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah. He led Hezbollah for more than 3 decades and was considered one of the most powerful figures in the Middle East. Israel likely used U.S.-made bombs in Friday's attack that leveled several high-rise apartment buildings. President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris both called the killing of Nasrallah a, quote, measure of justice. Meanwhile, Monday's attack targeted senior figures in the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, a Palestinian militant group. The strike leveled another apartment building.
We are Palestinian firefighters and rescuers from the camps in Lebanon who came to help our brothers after the raid that happened here in Ain ed-Delb. We have been here since yesterday, since the incident. We have not left the site, and we will remain here until we complete the entire mission, God willing. There are still people under the rubble, people we have not been able to rescue yet. We are doing everything we can to save them as quickly as possible.
So today, Israel killed the head of Hamas in Lebanon, along with his wife, son, and daughter, in a strike on their home in a Palestinian refugee camp. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu gave the order to kill Nasrallah shortly after giving a speech before the UN General Assembly. Before his remarks, dozens of diplomats walked out of the UN General Assembly hall in protest. Today, Hezbollah's deputy leader, Sheikh Naim Qassem, vowed to fight on, saying the group is prepared for a long war in his first speech since Nasrallah was killed.
Israel is committing massacres in all areas of Lebanon and choosing villages one by one until there is no village or house that does not have traces of Israeli aggression in it. It is attacking civilians, health organizations, al-Razallah scouts, all those who are in the streets and all those who are staying in their homes, including children, women, and the elderly. These people are not fighting the fighters, but rather are killing and committing massacres against civilians and innocents. The Islamic resistance will continue to confront the Israeli enemy in support of Gaza and Palestine, in defense of Lebanon.
Over the past 24 hours, Israeli strikes in Lebanon have killed at least 105 people, bringing the death toll over the past 2 weeks to over 1,000, with 6,000 people injured. The Israeli attacks have displaced about 1 million people in Lebanon. More than 100,000 have fled from Lebanon to Syria, according to the United Nations. Meanwhile, Israel forces launched a wave of airstrikes on Yemen Sunday, targeting the city of Hodeidah for the second time in recent months in response to missile fires by Houthi militants. This comes as more than 1,000 Israelis protested in Tel Aviv on Saturday to call on Prime Minister Netanyahu to refocus his efforts on securing the release of hostages in Gaza, where the death toll from nearly a year of Israeli attacks is nearing at least 42,000. For more, we begin in Beirut to speak with Kareem Chehayeb, the Beirut-based journalist reporting on Lebanon, Syria, and Iraq for the Associated Press. His recent piece for AP is headlined, "What to Know After Israel's Assassination of Hezbollah Leader Hassan Nasrallah." Kareem, welcome to Democracy Now! Well, why don't you tell us about the significance of this assassination and who exactly the Hezbollah leader was?
So this assassination really rattled all of Lebanon. Hassan Nasrallah for decades led Hezbollah and oversaw significant developments within the militant group. Oversaw, ending Israel's occupation of southern Lebanon, Hezbollah's sort of transformation into having a more heavy involvement in Lebanese politics with MPs, parliamentarians, ministers, and so on. And also led Hezbollah when it began to expand more regionally, notably in Syria, where they played a pivotal role in keeping Syrian President Bashar al-Assad in power. The news really shocked all of Lebanon, both supporters and people who oppose him. I recall I was on the streets here in Beirut when the news happened, and some of his supporters were screaming. They were waiting, shocked by the news, and they thought that this was a leader. Some told me that they felt like he was immortal, almost. And of course, his assassination, on top of a handful of Hezbollah leaders, 7 senior leaders over the past 8 days, really rattled the organization. Even the deputy leader, Naim Qasim, said so today. But he said that they're going to regroup and appoint a new leader soon. It's unclear when, and it's definitely something that rattled the region for sure.
I want to go to Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu speaking this weekend.
Nasrallah was not just another terrorist. He was the terrorist. He was the axis of the axis, the main engine of Iran's axis of evil. He and his people were the architects of the plan to destroy Israel. As long as Nasrallah was alive, he would have quickly rebuilt the capabilities we took from Hezbollah. Therefore, I gave the directive, and Nasrallah is no longer with us.
If you can respond, Kareem, to what the Israeli Prime Minister said after the assassination, and also what has happened since, both the killing of a top-level Iranian commander, along with Nasrallah, and now the head of Hamas in Lebanon with his family.
So, a lot of people after the assassination of Nasrallah sort of wondered, what happens next now? The Israeli government maintains that their goal is to, secure their north for their residents to return. And, since the assassination of Hassan Nasrallah, other senior officials have been assassinated as well. And the airstrikes, aren't stopping. They're continuing. And now people are anticipating a ground invasion. And of course, experts say that Iran is sort of in a policy dilemma. Iran has dealt with several attacks that are widely blamed on Israel, including a strike on a consulate building in Syria and the killing of Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran in late July. Iran hasn't necessarily responded in such a decisive way. And the question is, what are Tehran's red lines? We don't know how they're going to respond to that and what this means for the region. What we do know is that they've sort of maintained that they're going to keep piling diplomatic pressure. This is according to statements from different Iranian government officials. But the big question is, given the the severity of this attack, will this eventually not just widen the war in Lebanon, but also have a regional component? Iran has proxies in Yemen and Iraq, and there's a lot of speculation as to whether they will be involved or not. So there's a really big sort of gap as to what happens next in this very intense phase of the war.
Kareem, we're speaking to you in Beirut, so you're not only a journalist covering all of this, you're a resident there. Can you describe what the blast was like in the suburb on Friday, and then this Beirut-based blast that just took place?
Yeah, the airstrike in the Beirut southern suburbs that killed Hassan Nasrallah was probably one of the most, if not the most intense strike thus far in this conflict. Eyewitnesses and others, even as actually close to this office, heard 8 to 10 explosions. There were multiple airstrikes, and it leveled several buildings to the ground. It was a very shocking experience for many here. A lot of people were, panicking, and it definitely sparked a wave of displacement. A lot of people in the Beirut southern suburbs, immediately fled their homes and, went in large groups to other neighborhoods in Beirut to find safety. And then the strike yesterday near the Kola Bridge, it's a very central part of the city. It's very busy during the day. It's a critical point for public transportation as well. And this is the most central part of Beirut where Israel has struck so far in this conflict. And a lot of the questions now among people here is where else will be hit, given that it appears that central parts of the city could be possible targets, and this is not limited to just the south or the east of Lebanon anymore. So there's a lot of fear and anxiety and confusion among residents all over Beirut. where over the past, previous months, where the fighting was mostly limited to southern Lebanon, you didn't really feel that so much.
And we just have reports, and this has been going on for days, of Israeli tanks amassing along the border. What is the response of the Lebanese to what is taking place? Lebanon has one of the most, if not the highest percentage refugee population in the world. Now, 1 million people are displaced. Many are trying to go into Syria right now.
Yes, so, the Lebanese government has sounded the alarm on a massive displacement. Prior to this recent intense escalation, I guess, there was, over 100,000 displaced people. Now that number is almost 1 million in such a short period of time. The Lebanese government is struggling to keep up. Remember, this is a country that's going through an economic crisis. The government is essentially broke, and the United Nations is trying to get as much funds as it can to support. And a lot of what's helping these displaced people here is just the goodwill of a lot of people, community initiatives, and so on. A lot of people I speak to in Beirut and elsewhere are doing their best, but they're questioning how sustainable it is, within just a couple of weeks. And yes, it does seem like a larger number are going to Syria as well. So it's indicative of the desperation taking place. And of course, a possible ground invasion is certainly the talk of the town right now. And people are wondering what the consequences will be, whether it means this war will last for a much longer time and it will further widen the displacement. So, it is definitely a critical time. The Lebanese government, is trying to sort of push a recent, U.S.-led initiative for a temporary ceasefire for 21 days. The French foreign ministers in town met with the Prime Minister and the Speaker of Parliament, and it appears that the message that they're sending is that they're willing to go about the ceasefire and and try and put an end to this war as quickly as possible. The question is whether Hezbollah at the same time whether they will change their approach to this. Hezbollah have maintained even after Nasrallah's assassination that they will stop once there's a ceasefire in Gaza. And they accuse the Israelis and the American government of basically wanting them to set up a deal independent of Gaza. So the question really is, how can this diplomatic gridlock be broken? And I think we could be at a major turning point right now, given the heightened developments.
Do you see Lebanese troops joining or replacing Hezbollah militants on the border?
There is certainly a lot of speculation that has come about, the fate of Lebanon politically and with the war after Nasrallah's assassination. There are allied groups to Hezbollah that have been involved in the south since the beginning. For example, the Fajr brigades of the Islamic group, which is the branch of the Muslim Brotherhood. Hamas early on as well here in Lebanon were involved as well. The question, of course, is if there's a ground invasion, will more groups allied that have, some sort of weapons be involved? Appears that most experts say that it might actually be more about the allies of Hezbollah outside of Lebanon, whether the Houthis in Yemen or the Iran-backed militias in Iraq will be much more involved. So that is sort of the big question right now, given a possible ground invasion.
Kareem Chehayeb, we want to thank you for being with us, speaking to us from Beirut, journalist covering Lebanon, Syria, and Iraq for the Associated Press. We'll link to your piece, What to Know After Israel's Assassination of Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah. Democracy Now! Is funded by viewers like you. Please give today at democracynow.org/give.